So this month, it's about 2 years since the release of The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves, starring Robert Pattinson, Zoe Kravitz, Paul Dano, Andy Serkis, and a bunch of other people that just to sit here and name them all is probably going to cost me a lot more time, but there's a lot of people in here, and the cast is really stacked. Set 2 years after Batman's arrival on the scene in Gotham, trying to stop crime and all the corruption that's rampant throughout Gotham City. The Riddler shows up to cause some trouble in town by killing certain members of the Gotham elite, and Batman and the GCPD, well, Gordon, actually, have to stop him. Most, if not all, people have seen it by now, but if you somehow still haven't seen it, we are going to go into full-on spoilers, so if you don't want to know anything, somehow if you still haven't seen it, or if you don't care about spoilers, I gave you the warning. The road to this movie's release was a very unique one. Fighting through the coronavirus pandemic with the production shutting down numerous times, Robert Pattinson catching the virus, various other people getting infected with COVID. Matt Reeves was supposedly directing the actors through an earpiece for COVID measures, which was not on display at all in the right ways throughout this movie. And it's a very impressive feat, to say the least. And with the casting of Robert Pattinson, there was somewhat of a mixed response towards that idea. A lot of people, of course, are still going to reference Twilight, even though I would say a good amount of people, Batman fans included, have been won over by his portrayal. It's only one movie, I know. But there's still going to be that kind of stigma surrounding Robert Pattinson because of his role in Twilight, and he's managed to move on since then with other movies like Lighthouse and Tenet, and a few others I'm probably forgetting. I initially wasn't really thrilled about the idea of him playing Batman, but over time I started to warm up to the idea. There were some other friends of mine who weren't really that excited. They thought he was too skinny, that he should be more jacked like Ben Affleck's Batman. The lead up to it was a really fun ride, to say the least, especially considering that it was supposed to be a DCEU entry. They decided to continue more of the ideas that they had in mind, with Batman being shown as more of a detective and also portraying him as more unhinged. And there's a couple of villains in here that we have seen before in live action, but as any other new portrayal would, they give us a totally different vibe from them. The opening scene really sets the tone for the rest of the movie. It's a POV shot of someone looking down into the window of this big mansion in the middle of the city, which turns out to be the penthouse of the Gotham mayor. The first time I saw this, I thought it was actually Batman looking down, keeping an eye on things, but then as I heard his breathing, I started to realize that it was the Riddler, having heard his breathing patterns in the trailers at the time. I'll never forget the feeling I felt when I saw the Riddler just standing there in the background as the TV light flashes on him, the musical score just going I literally started to tense up. That attention to detail that Matt Reeves throws in here, literally indescribable. But then the following scenes ensue where we get a monologue from Bruce Wayne that he's been at this for 2 years, and it's established that his methods aren't working. The criminal element is still running rampant throughout the city. And various criminals, as they're going about their business, start to see the symbol in the sky, looking in the shadows next to him, and start to think that the Batman might actually be there watching them.
Fear is a tool.
That moment in particular made me go, oh my god, this movie's gonna be awesome. Now, we've seen various introductions for Batman a million times. What's a way that you can reintroduce him while still making it feel really exciting? When they hear his footsteps coming in, and he steps out of the shadows and pounds that guy to a pulp.
I'm vengeance.
And unapologetically thrashes every single goon in his sight. And one little detail that I've always loved is right after Batman says, I'm vengeance, you could hear one of the goons say, oh my god, it's him. I would assume that not everybody in the city has seen him, but I love little details like that because it adds not only to the mystery, but also the fear of the character, what this guy is capable of. And what we see him do in the next few seconds, it lets you know that this guy is definitely not messing around. In fact, I saw a video edit at the time where we see the shape icons of a PlayStation controller, an Arkham style type of edit. I gotta admit, those images started to flash through my mind as I was watching this sequence. Following in the next great scene, Batman shows up at the penthouse of the mayor who's now been killed by the Riddler. All the cops except for Gordon are staring at him intensely with a lot of hatred and skepticism, including the officer Martinez who tries to stop him from going in. This whole scene in particular is very tense. All the forensic experts and police officers in the room are watching Batman to make sure that he doesn't step out of line. Batman is watching everything that's unfolding as the cops are discussing the details of the crime, but he's also trying to be careful to not step on anybody's toes. It's only Martinez and the police commissioner that vocalize these concerns that these officers have, but if I were one of those cops, I'd probably say the same thing. Like, Gordon, What are you doing? Why is this guy here? He's a vigilante, for crying out loud. And this has been established in other Batman movies, in particular Batman Begins, where the Commissioner authorizes a manhunt against Batman and Gordon's the only one sticking up for him. Now, when I make comparisons like this, as I said in my original review, I'm not trying to say that the other movies did it wrong. It was just the nature of the genre at the time. There were certain limitations. They didn't really think that they could delve deeper into those areas. Now that it's been proven, more filmmakers now have the opportunities to expand on those areas. And as I said earlier, how Batman's trying to watch himself and make sure that he doesn't push any buttons. He only says a few things in this scene, but he's able to convey a lot of emotions without saying anything. And there's the look he gives the mayor's young son who's mourning the loss of his father. Obviously, we know the history of Bruce Wayne and what led him to become the Batman, but it's also a reminder of what this guy has gone through, and he understands what that kid is experiencing. Now, this movie doesn't show the murder of Thomas and Martha Wayne because we don't really need to see it, but one thing that this movie does correctly is that it does acknowledge the impact that it's had on Bruce Wayne. I promised I wasn't going to make a comparison to the Tom Holland Spider-Man trilogy, the recent ones. This is something that I wish that they could have done there with Uncle Ben. You didn't have to show his death all over again, but you could have at least acknowledged him a few times in order to show the impact that he's had on Peter Parker. Now, considering the track record of the Spider-Man franchise, I get why they didn't go that way, but it doesn't hurt to at least acknowledge him one time. That's something that this movie managed to do, and yet people don't really seem to have a problem with that. And I'm gonna get off my soapbox on that one, because I know I'm gonna get heated. I really went in depth about the first 20 minutes, but one of the biggest things to take away from this movie is the aesthetic. This movie has a really grainy type of feel to it, almost like a live-action graphic novel, with a really big noir flair to it. The Dark Knight trilogy definitely had those noir vibes, but that was a more realistic type of way, like what would Batman be like in real life. This one definitely leans a lot more into the graphic novel side of things. As for Gotham itself, it definitely feels like a character, similar to how it was portrayed in the other movies, including the Dark Knight trilogy. This one I would say is a lot more in vein of what Nolan had in mind with Batman Begins, and how it feels very grimy and dirty, not just with the way the streets or the buildings look, but how it feels like the corruption's lingering in the middle of the air, letting the viewer know that this place isn't exactly desirable. Oh, and it would behoove me to mention Nirvana's Something in the Way playing throughout this movie. It definitely fits the tone of Bruce Wayne's demeanor in this one. Nirvana was very much the punk rock band of the grunge scene from Seattle. Bruce Wayne in this movie, I think, has a very punk rock feel to him, especially when it comes to Kurt Cobain. No disrespect to anybody who likes Nirvana, I don't really care for them personally, but this song is the only one from the band that I actually like. And yes, it was because I heard it in this movie. But the thing to note about Robert Pattinson's portrayal is that he's very reclusive and extremely awkward. We don't really see that billionaire playboy persona where he would throw off suspicion that anybody would have that he's possibly Batman. Bruce Wayne spends a lot of time on his own, and it's evident when Alfred tries to get him to meet with the accounting people of Wayne Enterprises, and initially he's not really excited about it, but due to the persistence of Alfred, he has to try to keep up appearances, which he does manage to do in a way, but only at the service of trying to find the Riddler or seeing who else might try to get a hand in what the Riddler's up to. This is probably, I would say, the best portrayal of Bruce Wayne's trauma involving his parents. Some of the other films, including Christian Bale's portrayal, have managed to nail that in all their own ways. But this one gives us a really in-depth look, because as I said, Bruce Wayne doesn't really say a whole lot here, but it's all conveyed through his eyes. And Pattinson, I think, manages to convey that extraordinarily. Another thing about the character of Bruce Wayne, I've had to watch this movie at least a few times and watch other people's analyses of the movie itself. The arc that Bruce experiences in this movie is fairly generic at its core, but in the hands of Robert Pattinson and Matt Reeves, I think it's done very tastefully. He states at the beginning of the movie that his tactics aren't working, but he also believes that Gotham is beyond saving. Yet due to his guilt over what happened with his parents, he still feels like he has to try to stop the crime that's running rampant throughout Gotham. He believes that every crook in the city chooses this lifestyle, just like the man who killed his parents. But then when he meets Selina, he starts to open his eyes to the possibility that not every crook in the city is the same. And as Catwoman shows him, most of the time, people don't choose that type of life. They're thrown right into it without any say in the matter. At one point when she puts the contact lens on that he uses to record everything, he literally starts to see the world through her perspective and sees all these various officials from the city, including the cops, the city council, the state senate, and even the DA's office that are hanging out with all these mobsters, including Carmine Falcone, giving him and us the heads up that what the Riddler's going after is that there's something really big that's covering the entire city, as it's revealed by Peter Sarsgaard's character, Gil Coulson. One image that I really love is how when Gordon goes up to the roof and turns off the bat signal, and all of a sudden you hear this voice from the side, and Batman just steps out from behind the support beam. Normally that would scare anybody else. Gordon doesn't really get fazed, probably because of 2 years of doing this with Batman. He's used to it by now. I also have got to mention that since the partnership between Batman and Gordon is being showcased in this one, I love this partnership so much. Seeing how it was done with Gary Oldman and Christian Bale in the Dark Knight trilogy and seeing how it's played out here, these two dynamics as of right now, it's only one movie. In their own ways, I think they're equal to each other. When they find the severed thumb in the mayor's car, leading us to the thumb drive joke.
Thumb drive. Jesus.
Even now, I still snickered. I thought, oh my God. And even in the theater when I saw this 2 years ago, people started to audibly laugh out loud. Everybody talks about the thumb drive thing, but there's also the moment where Bruce is talking with Selina in her apartment and all the cats are brushing up against his legs.
You got a lot of cats.
Never think about strays.
I'm aware of that. As for Catwoman, my favorite portrayal of Catwoman is more than likely going to upset some people, and I know an old buddy of mine from the military, he and I disagreed on this vehemently. His favorite portrayal is Michelle Pfeiffer, and I know a lot of other people share that opinion, but for me it's Anne Hathaway. Yeah, I know, I'm probably going to set some people off. Don't care. Anne Hathaway's the best Catwoman. Zoe Kravitz, though, second best. So far. We'll see how the rest of the series goes. Now with Selina and Bruce, they have similar traumas that they've experienced. Bruce lost his parents, Selina lost her mother. But as opposed to Bruce, she was born into a poor situation, and eventually she had to fend for herself. And the partnership between the two is very reluctant, on her part at least. She does help him out here and there, but she's mostly motivated by her own agenda. She wants to help her friend Annika, and also getting revenge on the one who killed her mother. And this, I think, is the proper portrayal of a female protagonist, without making her too overpowered, because there are moments where she does struggle in the movie, particularly in the finale, but she also does come to Batman's aid when he shows her compassion by stopping her from going down a very dark path. But we'll get to that later. Oh, I gotta mention, this shot right here of the two of them laying on top of each other, couldn't help but wonder if that was a callback to Batman Returns. I'm gonna vote yes on that one. I also really like the design of the Batman costume, except for the nose. I think that looks a little awkward and weird, but considering that this is the early years of Batman's crime-fighting career, it doesn't really shock me that it wouldn't really look that sophisticated, but it almost looks to me like a translation of the Batman Arkham origin suit. And the bat symbol looks like it's two guns melded into one, which I read a theory at the time that it might have been from the gun that killed Thomas and Martha Wayne. It's not even suggested in the movie, but I do kind of like the idea of that he's carrying that guilt with him symbolically. And the design of the Batmobile, which looks more like a sports car with a big turbine engine. The Tumbler is still my favorite Batmobile, but this one is not a bad addition. Not at all. Oh, and as far as one of the villain characters, the Penguin shows up in here. We've seen the Penguin in other portrayals, most famously Danny DeVito in Batman Returns. There's also the one from the Gotham TV show, which I didn't really get that far into. But when I think of the Penguin, it's Colin Farrell. And Nolan North's portrayal in the Arkham series. Now, the Penguin's role in here isn't really that big. It's integral, yes, because it plays a part into the next step that they have to take, Bruce and Gordon, in order to solve the Riddler's next crime. Doesn't have some kind of a motivation. He's just there kind of in the background. I don't think he really needs that, though. He's just kind of there to pop every once in a while to maybe provide some levity. And Colin Farrell, I think, really just chews up every single scene that he's in. With the makeup, he's practically unrecognizable. Almost looks to me like a Penguin version of Robert De Niro's portrayal of Al Capone in The Untouchables. You're everything they say, ain't you? I guess we both are. I'm Oz. I'm gonna save the Riddler for later, but as far as other villainous portrayals, Carmine Falcone or Falcone, for the sake of this movie, we'll just call him Carmine Falcone. John Turturro plays him. And I think it's safe to say Carmine Falcone is like the John Gotti / Tony Soprano of the DC universe. Of all the other portrayals of Carmine Falcone in the past, Tom Wilkinson comes to mind in Batman Begins, with a really great monologue that he gives to Bruce Wayne before he takes off for 7 years. But as far as his portrayal in film, John Turturro is probably the best one. He has an integral part like the Penguin, but it's also his personal connection to Selina Kyle when it's revealed that he's actually her father, and he was the one who killed her mother and possibly Bruce Wayne's parents. But again, we'll get to that later. Turturro plays a character very reserved and mellow, but with a very charming feel to him. A reasonably likable person, but you could tell that he's just oozing evil. And he's one of the poster children of everything that's wrong with the city. And if I were a casting director or a creator of some kind in Hollywood, if I were gonna make a organized crime film, John Turturro would be on my call list. Really, Oz? 'Cause to me, you were always just a gimp in an empty suit. I'll spray paint your ass! But back to Batman and Gordon trying to solve the Riddler's crimes. The Riddler manages to get his hands on Gil Colson, Peter Sarsgaard's character, leading us to a very intense scene where he's got a bomb tied to his neck and the phone taped to his hand, FaceTiming with the Riddler with Batman standing nearby as he's trying to solve all these various riddles that reveal all the dirty laundry that he's been hiding from the public. Batman just standing there watching this happen, but he knows the answers to the questions and gives them to Coulson. Would Riddler have approved of that or not? If he didn't, could you imagine how much more scary that scene would have turned out? And even now, when he reveals that he gets bribed 10 grand a month, same reaction I had 2 years ago, I go like this.
10 grand? 10 G's a month, I get a monthly payment just not to prosecute certain cases.
What cases?
You didn't ask me that, come on.
Life on the line, still a politician. My dude. My dude. But then Gil Coulson ends up dying when he refuses to reveal who the rat is. The Riddler manages to give a clue of El Rata Alado, meaning a rat with wings, a stool pigeon. Managed to figure out, overhearing a certain conversation, that this big crime that the GCPD managed to solve might have something to do with what the Riddler's trying to reveal. Coulson decides to rather die than talk, knowing what kind of repercussions he would face, and he goes out, thankfully, actually, as a good person, even though he's not exactly a saint. Oh, and I have to mention that, for anyone who's not in the know, Peter Sarsgaard in real life is actually married to Maggie Gyllenhaal, who is Rachel in The Dark Knight. Both play Gotham City District Attorneys, and they both get blown up by the main villain. Did I mention that in the movie Night and Day by James Mangold with Tom Cruise, Paul Dano and Peter Sarsgaard are in a hostage situation at the film's finale. And here they are in the same movie, but the roles are reversed. I'm telling you, the details that my brain picks up on, I don't even know what to say. But of course, after that situation, Batman gets hauled into the GCPD, and every single cop except for Gordon wants to rip him to shreds for what happened. Gordon comes up with a way to get Batman out of there by having Batman punch him in the face, so that way it doesn't look like Gordon helped him out. And what I really love about this sequence is that Batman is shown to not really have it so easy, because in other movies he manages to get away clean without any trouble. This one is kind of like Indiana Jones, where he barely manages to get out of a dangerous situation by the skin of his teeth. All the cops are right on his heels, he barely manages to grapple up through the stairway without getting shot, and the moment of fear that he has right before he leaps off the building further humanizes the character even more. I do miss the cape-winged look that we would get in other Batman movies, but this is the first time we see Batman fly on his own in a squirrel suit. It's really obvious. But also I think that's part of saving the best part for later, that he's still kind of not fully spreading his wings just yet. He's just getting used to what he's doing in Gotham. And hearing Michael Giacchino's score, which by the way, throughout this entire movie, it's incredible. There's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. Further adds to the excitement, especially in this scene. And yet, he doesn't break a single bone in his body when he hits those girders under the subway line. Who cares? But Gordon and Batman, trying to stay one step ahead of the Riddler, decide to interrogate the Penguin, thinking that he's the rat with wings. And we get the really exciting Batmobile chase. Another thing that we've seen in other portrayals of Batman, you can't have a Batman movie without some kind of action involving the Batmobile. Going into opposing traffic on the highway, Penguin's trying to veer away from Batman, and any chance he gets, Batman is trying to stay on the Penguin's tail. And just when Cobblepot thinks that the Batman's gone, comes right through the fireball and knocks Penguin down on the ground. Loved it in the trailers and even in the final cut, especially this shot of Batman leaning down to look at Cobblepot saying, "You're coming with me, buddy." Then the following scene, I gotta mention this part right here where Gordon just yells in the Penguin's face.
God, what are you showing me? His head. Come on! Open your eyes!
Damn, he's fired up. But then, of course, they realize that the Penguin is actually not the rat with wings, when it turns out that it's actually La Rata, not El Rata Alada. And Batman realizes that they were thinking about it wrong the entire time when he types it in the URL bar, elrataalada.com. It's one of those things where they just thought about it too hard instead of thinking about it phonetically, where it could have saved them a lot of trouble a long time ago. I still remember my initial reaction when you saw URL and then he types in El Rata Alada. I literally said, "Oh, God!" That is so obvious in hindsight. Even the second time I saw it when I took some friends of mine, they had a similar response. So Batman and Gordon managed to figure out that Bruce Wayne is the next target for the Riddler, going into this abandoned orphanage, which it turns out the Riddler grew up in, that was all funded by the renewal fund that Thomas Wayne was a part of with his mayoral campaign back in the day. Unfortunately, Batman's too late to stop the bomb from going off in Alfred's face. Thankfully, Alfred manages to recover. Which, by the way, Andy Serkis as Alfred I think was a really great choice. He's not in the movie for very long, but I do like the small mini arc that Alfred has, or at least the one that Bruce has with Alfred, where he initially says to earlier, "Alfred, stop. You're not my father. I'm well aware." Similar with Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker saying to Uncle Ben, "Stop pretending to be my father," only for him to realize towards the climax how much he actually does care for Alfred, and accepts him for all intents and purposes as his main father figure. Now, the biggest spoiler in this movie is that Thomas Wayne actually has some dirt on him. It's revealed that his wife Martha had been in and out of institutions for many years, suffering from various mental disorders. During his election campaign, a reporter caught wind of this and was going to leak it to the media. Thomas tried everything in his power to stop him, trying to get Carmine Falcone to scare this guy into shutting up. Falcone, being the guy that he was, had this guy killed, and Thomas actually decided to go to the press and leak everything, which unfortunately led to his death. Bruce hears various stories about what exactly happened with his father. Carmine tells him that Salvatore Maroni had his father killed, but then hearing from Alfred in the hospital that Carmine Falcone might have been the one to do it himself, because not too long after he told Carmine that he was going to go to the police, he and his wife were killed right after. One of the news reporters in the film says that even 20 years later, the Wayne murders are still unsolved, but I think it's safe to say that Carmine might have actually been the one to send his hitman to kill Bruce's parents. Or it could have just been the Joe Chill route, who knows. They don't say it specifically, but I would not be shocked if that was the case. Oh, I just remembered. 3 times that Bruce tries to enter this club in order to talk to somebody in there, and he has the run-ins with the 2 twins at the door. I love how this gag plays out. At first, he shows up as Batman and goes, "Do you know who I am?" "Yeah, I don't care. You're not coming in here." And he has to fight his way through, and even breaking that guy Kenzie's nose, who turns out to be a corrupt cop. That sequence I also think was a callback to The Dark Knight, where Batman's in Sal Maroni's club and manages to interrogate him about where the Joker's hiding. The second time, he shows up as himself, Bruce Wayne. The twins are surprised to see who he is and let him in without any hesitation. And the third time, he just sneaks right past him. He's like, "Screw you guys, I'm done with you." But the thing about Thomas Wayne having the dirt on him, what I like is that, yeah, he's not exactly a saint, but they don't portray him as completely evil, that he actually still was a good person. In a moment of weakness, he made a really big mistake. Usually, the Waynes have been portrayed very positively as a positive impact on Gotham, and this movie manages to retain that, but unfortunately, this dark cloud has been settled in. That brings me into one of my criticisms with the movie, though. I wish that we had an extra scene to kind of let this soak in and give us a shot of how the people of the city are reacting to this news, and maybe give Bruce more time to absorb what's happening. I would imagine when he goes out in public next time, people are going to start to ask him, "Hey, what's that all about with your parents?" Maybe in the next one they could explore that. I would have liked just a little bit of a hint of what was to come, in this movie at least. Now back to Bruce and Selina. It's revealed that Carmine Falcone killed Selina's friend Annika, who was having a secret affair with the mayor. Batman then realizes after hearing this recording that a falcon has wings, and that Falcone is the actual rat. Batman chases after Selina when she decides to get her own revenge. But throughout these scenes, he tries to tell her, "No, you cross that line, you're going to become just like him." And eventually he manages to stop her. Even when she's yelling, he has to pay. And he replies with, "You don't have to pay with him. You've suffered enough." Reminds me of what Tobey Maguire did for Tom Holland in No Way Home, stopping him from killing the Green Goblin. Bruce basically saved Selina's soul because she helped him realize that not everybody chooses this life of crime. And one thing that I think this movie does really well, it manages to criticize the wealthy without conveying an anti-wealth message. A lot of people at the time criticized the movie for being too woke because of what Selina said about white privilege a-holes. I'm adjusting the words here. But I'm not really getting that impression throughout this movie. You can make the argument that the line was a little too much. At the time, I found it to be a little too in your face. Now it doesn't really bother me, because I think if it really was woke, Bruce could have easily been portrayed as completely clueless about everything. He has a reasonable assumption about crooks that every one of them chooses this life of crime, and thanks to Selina's help, he realizes that that's not the case. Which brings us into the Riddler, played by Paul Dano. He's basically a dark reflection of what Bruce could have become had he not been protected by somebody like Alfred. The Riddler grew up in an orphanage that was covered by the renewal fund from Thomas Wayne, and then after his death, it became a hive mind for all this corruption that was running rampant throughout the city, causing a lot of trouble in the orphanage that the Riddler grew up in. And because of him not having the safety net that Bruce had after his parents were killed, grew to resent the elite and the wealthy of Gotham and decided the only way to deal with it is by killing them. Basically another sign for Bruce that his methods are not working, that he is responsible for people like the Riddler to come out of the woodwork and cause all this chaos. With Paul Dano's portrayal, to say that this is the best portrayal of the Riddler, that's not really saying much. The last time we had Riddler in a feature film was Jim Carrey, which had its place at the time. He was very fun and over the top, and in some way I'll always have fun with that. Caffeine'll kill ya! Complete opposite type of portrayal in this one. And I think it's actually a really suitable villain for Batman to go up against. Physically, he's not really that imposing, but with his Riddlers and his questions and his strategic layout of everything, it causes Batman to think about what he might actually do next. When he finally meets with him face to face in the interrogation room in Arkham Asylum, he has all these delusions in his mind that he and Batman were actually a team, but Batman fires back at him saying, no, we are not a team.
You're gonna die alone. No. A nobody.
Got a little bit of Christian Bale in there. But then it's revealed that the Riddler had more up his sleeve, and he realizes that Batman didn't catch on to what was happening, and he finally manages to regain control. Batman goes back to his apartment and sees that he's planted bombs throughout the entire city, exploding, causing the city to flood, putting all the Gotham elite into Gotham Square Garden, where the Riddler's goons will close in and wipe them all out. Oh, and to rewind for a second, the way Carmine Falcone is brought into the light as he's shot. Again, I'll never forget, the first time I saw this, when I saw the light flashing above him, and when Batman starts to realize what's going on, I thought, bring him into the light. Now, in regards to the Riddler's ultimate goal, I've heard some people say that this was out of character. In comparison to the stuff that he was doing earlier, yeah, it might be somewhat out of character, but I think it's perfectly reasonable for the Riddler to do this because of his upbringing and how much he hates the elite and doesn't really think that Gotham's going to change for the better with this new mayor that they have in mind. His methods are to wipe the slate clean entirely through violence and vengeance. Just like Batman says, I'm vengeance. I'm getting ahead of myself, but we're gonna get to that. But as I've said before, and as other people have said this too, these are the best types of villains. You understand their motivations, while also at the same time not approving of their actions. So I think it's perfectly understandable that the Riddler would go to these extremes, hoping that most people would actually sympathize with his situation and his predicament and make him feel validated. But then we get that great sequence of Batman fighting all the Riddler's goons. Instantly reminded me of the big battle building sequence in The Dark Knight when he's fighting the Joker's thugs trying to save the hostages. I guess it's not a Batman movie without some hand-to-hand combat, but who the hell cares? This whole sequence never ceases to capture my attention. So when Selina finally saves Batman but is getting strangled by one of Riddler's goons, Batman injects himself with adrenaline after he was shot and nearly beats this guy physically to death, only to be stopped by Gordon. But when Gordon asks the goon who he is, he replies with, I'm vengeance. And then we get that really great look of Batman hearing that, and it's pretty clear that he's saying, oh crap. I know what I'm doing wrong. Going back to what Batman said earlier and how his methods are not working, and everything that he's experienced through Selina's help, seeing what the Riddler has turned himself into, Batman realizes that he's no better than the guys that he's fighting all this time, that his extreme methods are leading to all of this. Being a vigilante does do something, yes, but it's not ultimately what the city needs. They need a beacon of hope. As Gordon said at the end of The Dark Knight, a silent guardian, a watchful protector, a dark knight. So Batman manages to stop this electrical cord from going into the water as it's flooding the area, falls into the water, comes out, and brings all the people to safety. In fact, him falling into the water as a vigilante and coming out as a beacon of hope, basically an actual baptism of some kind. I didn't catch on to that until I saw a post on Instagram a few months after. And to think about it in that context, that's actually a really neat detail. And another monologue we get is that it's November 6th, with the whole city being flooded. Batman's realizing all the consequences of his actions, but now has hope for the city that it can change for the better. Now everybody's starting to look up to him as a protector, as a hero, not as someone to be afraid of. Now in regards to Riddler meeting the Joker in Arkham Asylum, some people accuse this of being too sequel baiting. I don't really get that impression, to be honest with you. I think it's Matt Reeves and company going, there's a lot of people in Arkham right now, and here's one of them. And if you're upset over the Joker being included yet again in a portrayal of Batman, well, I got some news for you guys. The Joker is the arch nemesis of Batman. Whether you like it or not, to not have him show up in a Batman series at all, something would be missing there. It's not like he was in the movie the entire time anyway. And also, we don't know what kind of role he's going to have in the next movie. It's still not really clear who the main antagonist is going to be. I think he is going to show up in some capacity in the next one. What I think they should do with the Joker, do what Marvel did with Thanos for several years. Just have him hovering around in the background, and then when the time is right in the climactic finale, you bring out the big guns there. A lot of people have suggested the Court of Owls to show up. I don't really know that whole storyline. It's kind of like a secret society of sorts. Maybe have the Joker being a symptom of them controlling everything in the city. You never know. There's a lot of directions that they can go in. But I do like how the Joker is shown from behind that window. You can't really see his face too clearly. You can see his hair's all messed up. And watching it on Blu-ray on my TV last night, I was able to see the crooked smile and the scratched up face that he has. Also, having seen the deleted scene that they released to the public where Batman has a talk with the Joker, I was able to notice those little details. I did really like that deleted scene that they put out. And ultimately they cut that because it wasn't telling us anything that we didn't already know from the rest of the movie. Reminding us that Batman sees himself on the same level as these crooks and how he believes that the victims of the Riddler's crimes did in some way have it coming to them. But that's also what scares him, that he doesn't want to be like the guys that he's fighting. I've already covered that before, but kind of wish that we did get that scene in the movie. But ultimately, I am alright with what they did here. Now the Joker's being portrayed by Barry Keoghan. He was Druig from the Eternals. And looking at his picture, I thought, I could see the Joker in him. Kind of looks like a psychopath in his own way. And then the movie ends with Bruce saying goodbye to Selina, who still maintains that the city is not going to change for the better, but now Bruce is hopeful that it is going to change. And they part ways, and Batman goes off into the sunset to protect the city. I actually remember that scene going on a little bit longer when he's on his motorcycle, but I don't know. But still, a really solid ending. So, that was a lot of ground to cover for me. I'm probably forgetting a lot of other stuff, and if any one of you have anything else in mind that you could point out, feel free to just tell me in the comments section. But in conclusion, The Batman is one of, if not the best portrayals of Batman in live action, and one of the best Batman movies that we've had. I still think as far as the movies go, the Dark Knight trilogy is the best portrayal of the character. These two are really, really close to each other, but honestly, I don't really like to compare. I just like appreciating a movie for what it is. Everybody can compare and have their preferences. There's nothing wrong with that. For myself, that's just how I feel. There's a lot of directions that they can go in with this series. I would like to see them do Mr. Freeze if they can find a way to make him feel grounded in some way. Or they could just go in the direction of Hush or Clayface. Whatever Matt Reeves has in mind, I'm more than willing to check it out. So those are my thoughts on The Batman. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie if you've seen it. And as always, see you in the next one.